I love Moxy and I love talking about it, but this has been on my mind for a little while, and I'm trying to get as many takes on it as I can.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to try to throw wrenches and stuff that already exists to see if it holds up.
For sure.
I'm a big proponent of it, so I have nothing against wrenches. You can throw away, my friend, but maybe so just so that I frame your question properly and I make sure I understand it, you wanna
Hmm.
you want my opinion on whether or not plyometric training can improve, let's say, neuromuscular coordination or muscle contraction and coordination, like contract relax cycle, and then the impact on SMO2 and O2 utilization. Is that the question?
No, there'd be no tie-in with SMO2. It's
Oh,
just
okay.
kind of I'm looking to see what Sean's objective statement would be on that. Actually, more, I guess it'd be more subjective, but I feel you're more of an objective individual.
Yeah.
So this is,
Yeah. So plyometric training is something that I haven't researched thoroughly. I'd say not
mm,
as much as the other stuff that I've looked into. Actually, on my to-do list is to watch the Natalia Verkhoshansky presentation from the Strength Coach Network, where
mm,
she talks about basic progressions for plyometrics. Yuri Pagel also recommended that I check out Joel Smith's book. Joel Smith, who has the Just Fly Performance podcast,
mm,
who talks quite a bit about sprinting and jumping.
yeah.
So definitely not my area of expertise, let's say.
Well, that's okay.
When you say coordination, how would you define that?
In this sense, in my mind, it would be athletically related.
Okay.
But there's definitely a crossover into just generic coordinative ability.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know you can be a coordinated runner and have the worst hand-eye coordination to throw a ball or to catch a ball or any type of stuff.
Yeah.
And that would be deemed uncoordinated, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Singular sport versus multi-sport versus if you jump more, you become more able to catch a ball. So I can see that point of view for sure. Like jumping is not going to make you better at catching a ball. Well, of
Mm-hmm.
course not. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, maybe I'm just different. I can catch a ball great with of ease whenever I go do a bunch of box jumps. I'm just kidding. That's a joke.
I got it. I got it. Yeah. Yeah. So
So,
maybe to bounce on that, I'll take a practical example. I'm working with a 13-year-old golfer right now, 13-year-old who plays golf. And as a general means of preparation, I'm introducing him to jumping and plyometrics
nice.
because it turns out that he doesn't know how to use his lower body. He can't leverage it when he's swinging, according to his golf coach and to his parents. And so obviously we're going, just pretty much doing everything with him, but definitely I feel like the plyometrics and the jumping and all the variations, obviously it's not just the plyos, but thinking about 3 planes of movement, thinking about simple like counter movement jumps, no counter movement jumps, counter movement jumps. Then you have you can add a bit of a rebound, like a double bounce, or
Yeah.
where, let's say, when you take off, you do an ankle hop first, and then you do your jump. So you're
Yeah.
going towards the plyometric stuff. Then you can do them continuous, and then you can go into the more intense stuff. So for me, that's kind of the basic progression in my mind. I guess I would add tall to short type exercises as the first one on that list, from less intense to more intense, and then we can go
Sure.
into the depth jumps and the drop jumps and all those things. But that's down the line. And I do think that, and I do use this with one of the outcomes being to improve his coordination, as in him being able to control his body in space better. Because
Hmm.
I do think that using that basic framework of, let's do those basic jumps, 2 foot, 1 foot, 1 foot, 2 foot, 1 foot, 1 foot, and all the things under the sun that go with it, Hayden's, lateral bounds, all those things, and just teaching them the basics when it comes to using their upper body with the lower body, how
Yeah.
to effectively leverage their lower body when it comes to synchronizing movement and stuff like that. Invariably,
Hmm.
that's going to transfer to coordination, to moving faster in space, to having more control on your body. Now, whether it's funny because we do a lot of ball stuff too, right? He does his
Yeah.
lateral shuffles, and we're still inside right now, but the weather's clearing up, so hopefully we'll soon be in the garden outside. But we're in the living room, so we have like, I don't know, 8 meters, and
Mm-hmm.
so we're just doing a bunch of lateral shuffles. I'm throwing the ball at him too, so that he has to work on both. I don't know if I would go as far as saying that box jump improve your ability to catch a ball, to go back to your your little joke from before. But there's no doubt in my mind that when somebody learns how to use their body better, well, that is, and that's one of the ways we could define coordination, is being able to coordinate movements in space with your whole body, depending on the task at hand. And so, yeah, for me, there's no doubt in my mind that doing some jumping, doing some plyos, again, all 3 planes of motion, with all the different variations that we can think of, that is going to be beneficial in terms of coordination. Yeah, I have no doubt in my mind. And I don't have a huge sample size, but the few people that I've used it with, and especially the kids, they benefit greatly from that, because really you just see, at first you just see a spaghetti, right? They have no bounce, they have nothing, they don't even know how to move their arms when they're running, and by just bringing in those basic jump and then towards plyo progressions, I definitely did see a significant improvement in the way that they can move and coordinate their movements in space. So I would say yes to that.
Isn't that cool? You know, a lot of the research that I've kind of come across that have produced the most, I'll just say popular, I won't say popular, should be the most significant results, has been plyometric jump training with kids, specifically prepubescent teenagers. Like, just because, you know, nervous system's nice and fresh, and I don't have to explain that to you or the people listening, because they're intelligent enough to understand why. I don't need to mansplain anything, I believe is what's said. That's really cool that you're doing that with him.
Yeah,
it's really cool that you're finding what you're finding.
Yeah, and I'm like, we didn't necessarily start with this, but now we're about a month in working with him, and that's, I would say, the main part of our training. Like I do the
Awesome.
warm up is like some ball games, throwing games, bouncing games, a bunch of power speed drills, teaching him the basics, how to do an ankle hop, a march, a skip,
Nice.
those kind of things. You know, jump from left to right laterally with a rotation, moving forward. And then we do a bunch of jumping work right now, where we're using the stairs in his house, right? We don't have a box. So he's jumping onto the 3rd step, and I'm him, giving him feedback. Hey, how high can you get your hips? And he's telling me when it feels good and not. So just trying to connect all the dots, doing some basic step off the 2nd step and stick the landing kind of thing, to do a little bit of eccentric work there. And then just some, very, very basic to start, but I think that it's going to open a lot of doors, and it's definitely going to make a difference in the way that he moves and he controls himself. Like, I tested his counter movement jump with no arms and his squat jump from a kind of a quarter squat position up with no counter movement, and both are the same. So he can't,
no way.
He can't leverage his elasticity at all, right? He has no bounce at all. He doesn't even know what it means to load and explode. So I feel like this is going to be super beneficial for him as we move forward. I used the My Jump 2 app to just test his vertical, and I don't have any jump mats or anything like that. So I'm just going to track his progress over time using that app. And we did broad jump and counter movement jump, no arms, and squat jump. And I'm looking forward to see what we can, get out of him moving forward. But I definitely think that, one, it makes him work hard, and he's a lot more inclined to working hard on those and getting a sweat going than doing just goblet squats. It's just boring for kids. Like, we're trying to vary the squats as much as possible, and the strength stuff, doing some skater squats right now, that he prefers to the weighted stuff on the lower body. But again, it's a squat. It's a good balance exercise, good mobility as well. So I'm pretty, open on that side of things. But yeah, I'd say that right now the warm up which is like games and power speed drills and throws and stuff. And the jumping is about half of our training, because I do think that that's gonna bring a lot of positive things to him as a kid and as an athlete too.
For sure. No, that's really smart. Well, based off what I've read, in my opinion, that's very smart.
Yeah, and
start young.
Yeah, start young. And I didn't invent anything. I spoke to William Whalen a couple weeks ago, and he obviously works with like pro golfers, and that's what he talked about is, teach them how to jump, teach them how to be explosive, elastic, teach them how to lift heavy stuff, and that's always going to be greatly beneficial to their swing and to their game. So I've been working with this kid for a month, and apparently yesterday his golf coach already said that his club speed has gone up quite a bit. Now, whether that's
Awesome.
me or not, I have no idea. And honestly, I don't claim that it is. But as long as he's getting better, everybody's happy, right? So
for sure, absolutely.
As long as the trend is up, we're good.
That's awesome. Man, obviously it's not you, it's the kid. It's his body, not yours. Right?
Exactly.
No, that's great. It's really awesome how quickly just patterns can be laid down, and how recruitment and rate of firing can just improve that fast in 4 weeks. Just is this glare bad? Do you have a glare on your side? Do I need to?
That's fine.
No, okay. I feel like I have just a line down my forehead.
Can barely see it. No, yeah,
okay,
I think the plyo side of things is something I need to learn more about. I understand the basics, I understand the basic progressions, but I definitely want to dig a bit more to have a better grasp on that topic, because I do think that it's very important. And then to the previous point, yesterday I watched that presentation on the Moxy Summit 2020. So I sent you the one about the swimming, which unfortunately is incomplete because they had to stop their project with COVID. And so that's a bummer. They literally just talk about the methods that they were going to employ and how they set it up, and they were still going through the pilot side of things. So unfortunately, there's not a ton to work on there. But another one that I watched from a guy called Stuart Percival, and he's in Manchester, UK, and he works with elite cyclists and triathletes, and uses a lot of Moxys. Like at some point, there's a picture, and he's got like 14 Moxys on a guy. Because he was trying to understand how essentially get the most holistic picture as possible of what was going on. And it was super interesting because, for example, on the thigh, you would put the VL, you'd put on the rec fem, you would put on the hamstring, on the glute, on the gastroc, and the deltoid, and then see how all of those interact as intensity increases. And you don't see a linear desaturation with all of the muscle groups, or it depends on which athletes, right? Some of them are nice and linear on all the muscle groups, so everything's contribution is fairly equal, or relatively equal, let's say. But then some people desaturating like the VL and the rec fem, but then hamstring, glute are still trending up, and then only past a certain threshold. He uses VT1, VT2, and past VT2, that's when everything starts going down. So there's a mismatch in the coordination. And he talks about, so it came to mind because you mentioned coordination, and he brings the idea, the really interesting idea that I've heard a couple times, more from the respiratory side, but he talks about it from the muscular side, the muscle pump effect, where essentially, well, you think about cardiac output and what that brings to the muscle. But then you got to think about the fact that, and that's a point that he makes, is that the heart can only eject what it is loaded with, right? Yeah. So preload is extremely important when you talk about cardiac output, because if you don't load anything, you can't eject, you can't push it out. And so talking about the muscle as a pump, right? If you have a nice compression reaction and the blood can keep going through, well, now you have that venous return, that preload, and then you can get a better output from the heart. But if you're not coordinated at the muscle and you're occluding, for example, now you're restricting venous return, right? And so that's going to affect cardiac output. And so he's got a really interesting perspective in terms of essentially, in a way, all limitations start with the muscle and end at the muscle, because you could say, hey, yeah, that's a cardiovascular limitation or issue because he's not bringing enough. But then again, how much is going back to the heart, which that might be limiting the ability of the heart to eject more. So talking about coordination work with different cadences, and that's something that I've heard Aaron Davis talk about quite a bit. Although it seems to be very difficult to apply. Evan mentioned that he tried to use it and that he had a hard time making it work. But essentially, for example, trying to use high cadence, low resistance work on the bike, for example, to try and push up the limit, push up the threshold where you go from a compression reaction to a venous occlusion, right? So say you're maybe occluding at, I don't know, 40% of your MVC, you're starting to occlude on the venous side. Well, what if with some training we could get you to not occlude until 50 or 60%? Right now, you're able to assume a much bigger load with a lot less stress on the system because you don't need as much O2, and you're just circulating it better. And this Stewart guy was also talking a lot about the importance of strength training, the importance of absolute strength when it comes to endurance athletes, the importance of plyometrics as well, because again, if you talk about contract relax cycle, well, ideally you want that to be as fast as possible. And you know that graph where you see the difference between an amateur and an elite level athlete, that the biggest delta is not in the contraction speed, it's in the relaxation speed. And that's what they showed through some research that he mentions. I asked him for the papers earlier, so I'm looking forward to going through those. But essentially, they put a cuff on someone who's cycling. There's a control group that's just cycling at a 50 watt power output, and then the cuff is contracting for it starts with short period of time, so it's like a 300 millisecond contraction. I don't know how often they repeat it. I have to look at the paper. Probably every few seconds or something like that. And then they increase it to 600 milliseconds, the duration of the cuff contraction, essentially. So they're applying external pressure on top of the cycling. And at that point, you actually see SMO2 going up with a 300, 600 millisecond extra contractions to the cycling. And his theory would be that, hey, well, now the muscle is acting like a pump, or the cuff is acting like a pump to push more blood back, to which is going to increase cardiac output, which is going to increase the amount of O2 that's there. And then when you get to that threshold of 900 millisecond or 1,000 millisecond contraction times, now you see O2 depleting really quickly. So this seems to be that threshold where, and again, I think it depends from individual to individual. There's that threshold where you go from having a compression reaction and a positive one that's going to be able to kind of further enhance and fuel your performance, down to when you start occluding because you're not giving enough time for the blood to come back through, or your relaxation is not efficient enough to let the blood back. And so now you're starting to use up a lot more than you can bring. And so he talks about the importance of measuring counter movement jumps and stuff like that with endurance athletes, and then kind of keeping a big focus on the coordination aspect. So intramuscle, neuromuscular coordination for those athletes in order to improve essentially their blood flow, really, and make their contractions as quote unquote easy as possible, right? You know that obviously as absolute strength rises, the relative strength you're going to have to use to apply the same force or to generate the same amount of force is going to be much lower. And so this is kind of what you want to bring people towards is, hey, let's try and make that as efficient as possible, raise the absolute ceiling, and then make that coordination as optimal as possible, so that all aspects will be improved, whether it's from the economy from a metabolic standpoint, or from a coordination that is in turn going to impact blood flow, venous return, cardiac output, and all those things. So I thought that was a really it's maybe the first time that I see, and I haven't seen everything, but I've been watching a lot of stuff around Moxy, pretty much everything I can find, I can put my hands on recently. And that's the first one that I see. And that is really, I'd say, together with Daniel's presentation on the Moxy YouTube, where he talks about VO2 testing with Moxy and what that brings. That Stuart guys does the same, but I think the coordination focus, it's the first time I see it. I hear you put like this, and it makes a lot of sense. So I'm interested. I invited him on the podcast, obviously, and I'm going to try and get those papers from him to see if I can dig into the research a bit. But it seems like there's something there when we talk about coordination. Sorry, I sidetracked your conversation on plyos, but you said coordination, and it was already there, so I just went for it.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah. So that was really interesting. I don't know what you think of that.
Well, I'm reflecting on it. It makes a lot of sense, and it's really freaking neat. There's so many things that, with technology now, we're available to see, and we can, our speculations become theories, and we can continue to test them and test them and test them. Now, I'm a believer that there's never really a quote unquote true answer to things. There's potentials that lead to more research and questions. But that, the whole time you're talking in my mind, like, man, Sean needs to be a professor, if he's not already, because I feel he would be a magnificent individual to get people to understand complex things when it comes to the body, especially because, I mean, I won't say you're addicted, but you're really.
I'm definitely addicted. I'm definitely addicted. Yeah. When I wake up at 4 a.m. and I can't sleep, it's because I'm thinking about SMO2 trends and THB trends. So
that's so cool.
No, I don't know if it is. I don't know if it's cool.
Well, I mean, as long as it's not impacting family life, right, then it's cool.
I keep it in my head. I keep it in my head.
Yeah, and that's great. Everything. So, what kind of caught my attention the most, and this is kind of it's something specific within you said, is kind of all encompassing. You're familiar with the Frank Starling effect, right? The heart.
Remind me what that is.
So that's what makes the heart go boop to push blood out.
Okay, yeah.
It's think of it as like the stretch reflex to plyometric jump training.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So the more, I guess, powerful it is, the more blood it can be put out, and it's pretty much dictated on venous return.
Yep. Okay.
So I find that really interesting because you have two major complexities of surrounding SMO2 and coordination, and it's pretty reliant upon. I really hope I get ripped apart after I say this in the comments, because I personally thrive off that. But to me, it seems like it pretty much is determined upon one receiver. Like the signaling comes, the Frank Starling effect happens. Starling or Sterling? Sterling effect happens, and then blood goes out, and then nutrients are there or not, and that is dependent on the venous return. Well, it can't function well if the venous return is low. But what if it's too high, and then the Frank Starling effect can't react quick enough? Well, then what happens? Or, I mean, there's a bunch of what ifs, right? But from the coordinative aspect, it's really unique to me how I wonder if that cuff, I wonder how much of an effect that cuff has on the venous return directly associated with that. Now, obviously, I can measure cardiac output, stroke volume, and so on and so forth, and the elasticity of the arterial wall and everything based on all that. Yeah. I'd be really curious to see that being measured in combination with the cuff and SMO2, and just overall, if there's an ability to measure, to throw in a Moxy in there as well, because that's, Moxy's pretty great.
Yeah, let me pull it out, because why not? We can do what we want, where it's our house. Let me just see, Teachable, Moxy Academy.
While you're doing that, I got an email from the Kickstarter that they well surpassed their goal.
Yeah, man, it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, I did back it. I got the well, I don't know if she'll watch it. But sorry, honey. I did get the high tier one with the monitor. I need to test this stuff on the swimmers before I do it.
Yeah, yeah,
Before
for
I
sure.
get to the dissertation part of the PhD, which that's that'll be fun to do. I want to make sure that I can make it waterproof.
Yeah,
So
well,
it's
from the conversation with Roger, that I forget the other gentleman's name who presented on the swimming study that he's setting up with the Moxy,
mhm.
um,
Yeah, I
and
wish I could have watched that. I was at a swim meet.
yeah, it's still there. It's where is it? Cycling. You see my screen
I
now?
see it. Yep, yep. The effects of ergometric swimming on muscle oxygenate.
Yeah, that's it. So Dr. Chris Myers. So check him out and maybe send him a message, because I mean,
Okay.
from my experience, all those people are always happy to hear that people are interested in what they're doing. But yeah, to come back to the presentation, this is Stuart right there, and so effects of rhythmic muscle compression on cardiovascular response and muscle oxygenation at rest and during dynamic exercise. So that was the rest one. And so this is SMO2 over time. And you can see these are the cuff compressions that they added. So you can see the cuff here on the right. And again, I have to, I guess the title is here. So I'll go dig up the study after and look at what I'm interested in and see the time between contractions. So here you
Yeah.
can see the static contraction for 300 milliseconds, 600, 900, and you can see as soon as they start the compressions, you can see SMO2 go up. And the guy's at
Yeah.
rest, huh? He's not moving. So just having that light added rhythmic pressure on the muscle essentially assists venous return, and then increases the amount of O2 that's in the muscle, which is pretty neat, all the way up until that 900 millisecond threshold, beyond which, once they get to 1,000 millisecond, now you see O2 being depleted, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So it's up to a point, it works better, and then it goes down. So that's at rest, and then he talks about the next part, which they did. So while cycling, and so the top the circles are 50 watt at 50 watts, and the triangles are at 100 watts, and then the white ones are the control, so they don't have any added pressure cuff, and the black ones have an added pressure. And same thing, you can see the times here: 300, 600, 900, and 1,000 milliseconds. So again, just like before, when they cycle here for, what is it? They've got a 2-minute rest calibration, and then they ride for 4 minutes with no pressure. And then the pulse pressure group, so they start adding the pressure, and you can see again SMO2 rising, right?
Yeah, it goes up. That's
Power,
so cool.
even though power is constant, and it's positive all the way until, well, it's funny because so at the lower power output, the 600 millisecond contraction or cuff contractions are still have a positive effect, and then at 900 it starts to go down, and at 1,000 it goes way down. But for the 100 watt group, it's beneficial at 300, but then it does start to desat quite a bit at 600, and then tremendously at 900, right?
Yeah.
And so you have the compression that's created by the cycling itself at the given power, plus the pressure that is applied by the cuff. And I guess if you have to look at the total sum of those two together, and that's going to give you an idea of what's going to happen from an oxygenation standpoint. So I thought that was pretty fascinating to go back to our coordination talk.
Yeah. Oh,
Because
that's really cool. Why did he have him on a recumbent bike?
I'm not sure. It wasn't his study.
Okay.
It was all
Okay.
those brilliant people's making. So I'm not sure. And then
Oh, okay.
another thing that he talks about is the central the central repercussions of that. And all they had was that cuff on the right thigh or the left thigh, I forget. There was no additional wattage or anything like that. And you can see heart rate responding directly to the 300, 600, 900, and 1,000 millisecond Cuff pressure changes when there's no change for the control group. You can see, what is it? Maximum aerobic power.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it? No. Maximum arterial pressure. Sorry, in millimeters of mercury. So that's maximum arterial pressure. So you can see that go up, and then you can see VO2 going up slightly, but then minute ventilation responding as well. Not necessarily to the 300, but as soon as he's in the 6, 9, and 1,000, there's a response there too. So that that added pressure from the cuff, which could come from a lack of coordination, right? If you have somebody who's new and who spins and who's essentially over contracting or under relaxing, to speak very plainly, you would have those central repercussions with a heart rate that gets elevated, with ventilation that increases. When really, if you deal with the local situation at the muscle site and you improve that coordination and that relaxation ability, and again, that goes back to a previous conversation, by using strength training and plyometric jumps and stuff like, or plyometrics, that will all have a positive impact on coordination, the ability for the person to relax faster between contractions and maintain steady blood flow, and even beyond that, assist venous return and in turn cardiac output, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I follow 100% what you're saying. Good.
Yeah.
That's really cool study.
Yeah, it's super cool. So I want to dig up the paper and read the thing and figure out a bit more about this side, because it's interesting to me again, because Aaron has mentioned that working on coordination at high velocities, high velocities, I guess, high turnover rates and low resistance, to improve that aspect specifically. But again, it's just, I mean, and no fault to Aaron himself, but he doesn't share a ton on social, which again is his way of doing thing, and more power to him. That's not a problem. But sometimes you hear him say something and it's then hard to dig up exactly how he did it or how he went by it. And so that maybe gives a bit more context on that side of, hey, coordination is actually super important. And it might actually be the first thing you want to tackle before you go and say, hey, there's a cardiac limitation there, or hey, there's a respiratory limitation there. Because again, these things are going to be directly impacted by the coordination at the muscle.
I like it. That's, I hope we painted a clear picture for everybody who listens to this.
Yeah, I hope so too. That was my attempt at explaining what I thought I understood.
Well, I mean, it's very, it makes a lot of sense, and it's things that we talk through this stuff, and sometimes coaches and athletes don't realize just how many inner workings there are to athletics and performance, and actually just training in general. You want to be healthy, we got to coordinate all this crap. You want to perform really well, you got to coordinate all that crap. It's obviously I say crap with an asterisk, but it's so cool, Sean.
Yeah,
that was really neat study, and that was really cool to see. Will everybody be able to see that on the video?
Yeah, it was on the screen, so everybody should be able to see it. Nice. And for those awesome. Who are interested, you can go to just search Moxy Summit 2020, and you can sign up for free on Teachable, and you can watch all the presentations from the 2020 summit. There's a whole, I watched almost all of them in the last few days. The model for interpretation of muscle oxygen data by Dr. Chris Cooper is quite technical, but it's good to understand how NIRS works. Climbing muscle oxygen and climbing research is a good one. Then they talk about iliac artery syndrome in competitive cyclists and interventions around that. There's a bunch. There's the Czech Republic, the Czech national cycling team, like track cycling team, uses Moxy to kind of auto-regulate positions. When they ride all like 4 people one after the other, and they draft and stuff. And so they use Moxy to see, okay, when is it time to go back, to go to the back? How long can he stay in front? How do we have to organize rest and work ratios? So they use Moxy for all of that, which is pretty cool.
That's really neat, man.
Yeah. So there's a bunch. There's like about 10. I think there's 10 or 12 presentations to go through, and that's just the 2021. I haven't gone back and watched at the older ones, which I will have to do at some point. Because again, I'm just trying to understand as much as possible around all that. There's a lot. There's so much cool stuff, but there's also so many unknowns still, which I find one of the most fascinating things. Is like you said, we can try and have hypotheses and try to test them and see what comes out the other side and if it makes sense or not. It's the last few days I've been realizing that using the Moxy is actually not as straightforward as I thought it might be. But like everything, once you dig a little bit more, you realize that it's a little more complex than you thought at first.
For sure.
But again, it also makes it exciting because there's stuff to figure out that not a lot of people have figured out yet.
That's true. The Moxy, using the Moxy is, and looking into all of it is, I feel it's revolutionary. What do you think?
I think so too. I think it's like, it might be the new heart rate monitor, on steroids, obviously, but it's like, back in the day when these things cost an arm and a leg, and now everybody has one. I do think that we'll probably get to that point, but there's got to be a big leap forward, or a slow progression forward, probably over the next few years, in the understanding of the data that's collected, and then how that ties into adjusting training and recommendations in general. Because again, like last week, I did a modified 5-on-5 with a client. Then we did a training session on the back end. In the next few days, I collected all the Moxy data and I interpreted it to the best of my ability and knowledge. And then I shared it on the Moxy forum, and I sent it to Andrew Feldman as well. And the response that I got from the forum, I had him on the podcast 2 days ago, Philip Batterson, so the physiologist who works with Moxy. He gave me his point of view on what he saw, and then Andrew responded to my email very kindly, as always, and did the same. And they both had different angles on what was going on, right? Even if you take two guys that have been using Moxy since it started, like 7 years ago, and they still both they don't necessarily have the exact same point of view and conclusion off of the same data, it tells you that there's still some work to be done to assist with that interpretation. I'm sure at some point the algorithms will be able to do that, and I think that's one of the goals with the Moxy portal, is at least having a basis to start from when it comes to interpreting data, and then trying to have more data to work from. I was on one of the presentations, Olav Alexander, I think his name is, was talking about the VO2 Master and other tools that can be used to assess and direct training. And he was talking about the kind of the big data side of like Garmin and Strava, and how much data they have from all the people using their stuff, together with SMO2, together with altitude and temperature, and if they're inside or outside, and all those things. So I think there's a lot that's going to come from that, and being able to aggregate a lot of this and enhance our understanding of it, and then better interpret it, so that we can better recommend stuff to people, whether it's the coach's job right now, or the app and the algorithms job down the line. And then I'll let you put a word in a second, but my mind went to a conversation I had with Jonathan Goodman. I don't know if you're familiar with the guy. He founded
we talked about him.
Okay, he founded the Personal Trainer Development Center, and he was talking about advances in tech in the next 5 to 10 years, and what that's going to do to the coaching and fitness world. And I think he's correct in saying that in the next 5 to 10 years, algorithms will be able to write much better programs than we ever could, taking all the different variables into consideration. And so the role of the coach is obviously going to be applying the program and coaching the athlete. And that's kind of where I see this going with the Moxy, is like, right now we have to do the work to figure out what the data means. But if everything goes as it will go, I guess there's no turning back from that, except for a solar flare or whatever. But that aside, we're going in that direction. Tech is advancing, and soon I hope those interpretations from the Moxy data will be able to come out on the other end pretty clean in terms of here's what you should do, here's what you shouldn't do, here's what you should focus on, which is going to help a lot of people, advance their training. So I definitely do think that Moxy is revolutionary in that sense. I think the barrier right now is the lack of software, which is being addressed with the portal, and the lack of overall consensus and understanding of how to interpret the data and apply it practically to training. That's right now the bottleneck. But with the more people using it, more people testing, more people talking about what they're doing and seeing if it works, that's definitely I think the future of where it needs to go. What do you think about Moxy?
I love it. Obviously, I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible. I was first introduced to it with Evan, and I want to say I'm homies with Evan. I hope he feels the same way. But I had a lot of really cool conversations with him a few years ago when I first moved to Georgia, specifically about muscle oxygen, all that stuff. And I really think there's a strong opportunity with the limitations that can be identified, or the limiters that can be identified with Moxy. That, I don't disagree that algorithms would be able to write a better program or create better content or whatnot eventually. But the knowledge that can be gathered from the Moxy specifically can really alter how we perceive things and how we can at least start writing things. Because the whole lactate threshold crap, right? Or the energy systems use them one at a time, and then they just kind of cycle through it. Maybe I don't know how. I don't know how this works. Help me, type of deal. I feel specifically with lactate threshold stuff, like we can find fatigue contributors faster and more efficiently, and then we can actually be able to develop protocols to limit fatigue onset, the timing that fatigue comes about. Now, the best part about Moxy for me is going to be able to find it in swimming, because I think there's going to be a really cool link between functional training, basically just like the CrossFit methodology in a sense, and swim performance. And that's where the second I kind of started talking to Evan about it, Moxy specifically, was, I believe, a little bit like pre-quarantine over here. And we, post-quarantine, I had a couple high school kids and a bunch of college kids, swimmers. One of them's, I think, second in Malaysia, second fastest swimmer in Malaysia. And he's trying to represent Malaysia at the Olympics, whenever the Olympics happen. And I put them through some stuff, and I saw some really interesting things. I didn't have a Moxy then. I didn't have any way to measure anything physiological outside of heart rate. My cat just hit me. Heart rate, and really any numbers on the bike, rower, and skier. That's all I had to go based off of, right? I couldn't poke a miner's finger in my garage to get a blood reading, because that's not legal. And I don't have the paperwork to make it legal anyway. And the revolutionary aspect, I specifically have in mind, holistically, I believe it applies, but for me specifically, there's a piece in swim training that's missing, competitive swim training that's missing, because we were thrown a massive wrench, and by not having any access to pools anywhere here, and I'm assuming everywhere, to where some of these kids are like, well, what the hell do we do now? Do we go run? We go, let's do some curls with our backpacks, type of deal. And then Kyle and I got together, and Kyle kind of wrote this at home swim dryland type of deal. And I took the template and applied it to the kids I was working with, and holy crap, when they got back into the pool, I think we've talked before, some of them were just completely different. They were worlds ahead of the others on the team. not necessarily from a feel standpoint for the water, because they're out of the water for 4 months, 3-4 months. So, that sucked. But their ability to kick further, longer, and faster was quite elevated. And like, we spent a good amount of time on the assault bike, but we also did other things: reverse sled drag uphill, increase range of motion, hip, knee, and ankle, increase ankle stability, knee stability, hip stability, and see if we can open up our spine a little bit more too, from T to L. And I don't. It's all subjective because it's perception or observation of what I saw, since I can't really claim that it all worked. But I feel the Moxy can help. I feel like that's the one piece that's missing. It's like, hey, this actually could identify the limitations that these could help, type of deal. I mean, swimmers have no idea where they are relative to space. We're in water, so when we're in the air, it's very different. And that's also another reason why Kyle and I did a lot of the plyometric training stuff. But sorry, I didn't mean to ramble. But that's kind of my take on, selfishly, why I view the Moxy is revolutionary, and unselfishly and objectively, watching you talk to Evan, reading all the articles produced by all those guys at Moxy, and really even Portamon, basically all Nier's stuff is pretty freaking neat. And I'm glad you're addicted to it, because somebody needs to be advocating it as hard as you are, and not like as a paid ad or a paid advertiser for it. I mean, I'm hoping to do the same thing. I personally don't have anywhere near the knowledge that you do with Moxy specifically when it applies to like holistic training. Mine's mostly in the specific realm of swimming. But that's kind of my take, or my piece on that. We're not gonna have time to talk about Chromeblock, are we?
We can take a few. No,
Well,
I think you're right. And when you said specifically the swimming, a little thing that even came out of that webinar on the climbing guys is they did the test of, when the climbers are resting, the difference between just having your hand on the hold without applying any force, or taking it down next to your side and shaking it like they do, right? And the difference in resaturation in the forearm muscles. And they saw a significant increase in O2 with the arm being close to the body and shaking it, which makes sense, obviously, opposed to up on the hold, which kind of validates the idea of, hey, if your arms are tired, put them down towards your side, let blood come back in, and that's going to be more efficient than if you stay up here. So even just tiny things like that, those insights can come from Niers. And the other thing that I think will be a big player is the direct feedback component. You see where you are, and some of the clients that I've been working with, they come in like, where's the Moxy, where's the rower, and want to get on and do their intervals and see their O2 go down and see how far they can push it, and then see how far up they can recover, which kind of gets them focused on the right thing. It's like full out effort and then full recovery to maximum reoxygenation, and then you go again, which takes their mind off of I don't want to rest, I just want to go because this is what I'm doing, And so even just for that, for the psychological aspect of giving a physiological target to people and being, this is your goal, you want SMO2. And what's fantastic with the portal is they can also work in rate of change of SMO2, right? So you could set yourself at a certain wattage and be like, okay, I want to slow desat from that point onwards. So I want to see a rate of change of, I don't know, it's percent per second, I guess. So you might want to see, I don't know what that would be, a tenth of a percent per second. So over 10 seconds, you're down 1%, SMO2, and just try to keep that trend. So you can start playing with those trends. You can then see the resaturation trend. How steep is that? How can we make it steeper? Can we show that as an assessment tool? Repeat sprints, for example, for for a team sport athlete, okay, so
Mhm.
let's do those sprints and let's see how fast you resaturate. And then when you do the retest, you can show it took you from, it took you 1 minute, 20 seconds to go from 15% SMO2 to 80% SMO2. And then a few weeks later, after you applied the training protocol, now we're down to like 50 seconds for the
Mhm.
same resaturation ability, which means that you're ready sooner. You can go harder again. And that's positive for the sport. And that's one thing that Brian Kozak was saying. Again, we exchanged a couple comments on his Instagram. I didn't even know he had one, but
Mhm.
I found it by chance. I was like, oh fuck, it's Brian. And they were showing some intervals with ice hockey players on the ice, and then he was talking about what they had done and what had changed in their ability to recover. And then I think there's so much there, but it needs to be understood better by many people. There are those people out there that are doing great work and that have a really, really, really good grasp on it, like Brian, like Aaron, like the Stewart guy as well, like Evan. But I think for everybody to really leverage that technology and be able to make the most out of it, it's going to take a lot more, I guess, education and maybe more centralization of knowledge. I guess that's what the Moxy Summit is, and that's honestly what I'm trying to do, is find out all those things and then try to bring them all to the middle to see
Mhm.
what makes sense and what ties in with what, and then how can we best use it to do our jobs better, really, and get people, fitter, faster, more endurant. That's really what it is.
Yeah, for sure. It's really cool, man.
You
Uh,
said, what was the last topic you wanted to touch on?
well, it may have to wait until next time potentially, but the Cronbach video, you gave me homework to do for the next time we talk, and it was that.
Well, if you have
And
a bit, of time, I can take some. I'm cool.
I don't have that, not as much time that would be able to fit the conversation, honestly.
So let's do it. Let's do a teaser for next conversation. Tell me what,
Yeah,
like the basic stuff, and then we can maybe go into detail next time.
well, I honestly just kind of wanted to analyze the conversation a little bit from just a reflective standpoint, introspective standpoint, and a data production standpoint, as well as it really seemed to irritate him with certain components like the inspiration, respiration, ventilation, and people's understandings of it. And also what made me laugh. He said if I have math in my
Programming.
math in my programming, uh, something along the lines of it would piss me off. And I was like, huh, interesting. Man, I don't know why that stuck with me.
Yeah.
I just found it very unique. So that for sure. And then if we have a little bit of time after next time, I do want to have a conversation with you about philosophies of coaching and philosophies of just kind of a banter or a conversation of questioning with each other, devil's advocate type of stuff on approaching types of people, types of training. Like we had talked before about maybe you keep a client for so long, they should be, I think you said 3 months. After that point, if you still have them, why do you have them? Like you're failing at your job potentially, or they've now become a friend and you can actually collaborate on content. And the psychology piece is a lot of fun for me, but that's for after we stop recording. We'll talk 5 minutes about that because there's some really cool stuff that I want to share with you that I can.
Okay, cool. Let's keep the podcast review for next time, and we can maybe go into detail on the few things that you picked up, and cool. And we'll kind of go from there.
Awesome. That sounds great. Right. I appreciate it, buddy.
I appreciate you coming on for that casual chat, my friend.
Hey, I'm glad we can keep it casual.
All right. For everybody who got to that point, thanks for watching, and leave us a little comment below. Tell us what you thought. If you have any questions, obviously leave them below. And hope you tune into the next one. Take care, everyone.